The courtroom that night in downtown Los Angeles felt unnaturally cold. The pale fluorescent lights flickered and hummed above rows of tense faces, people who had waited years for this day. Every seat was taken, every breath shallow. At the center of it all sat Kelly Pack, hands folded neatly on the defense table, her expression carved from stone. To the untrained eye, she looked calm, professional even. But everyone in that room knew this was no ordinary hearing. The murder of Juliana Reading had haunted California for nearly a decade, a story soaked in betrayal, silence, and power. When detectives matched Pack's DNA to samples collected in Juliana's small Santa Monica bungalow, the cold case that had languished in forgotten files suddenly burst back to life. The forensic evidence was devastating. Pack's DNA had been found on the victim's clothing, the door locks, and, most damning of all, on Juliana's throat. To the seasoned detectives who had chased dead ends for years, it felt as though the ghost of Juliana herself had reached out to point at her killer. From the moment the trial began, Elena Rhodes, the lead prosecutor, commanded the room like a storm contained within a suit. Her voice was low but unshakable as she addressed the jury. Juliana Reading's life was taken by someone who knew exactly what they were doing, she began. Someone who entered her home with a purpose and left only when she was certain Juliana would never breathe again. The evidence will show that person was Kelly Pack. Behind her, enlarged photographs of Juliana's bungalow glowed under harsh courtroom lights. Overturned furniture, shattered picture frames, the faint handprint where Juliana had fought for her life. Rhodes walked past them slowly, letting silence hang heavy. DNA doesn't lie, she said, her tone cool as glass. It places the defendant at the heart of this crime, on the door handle, on the victim's clothing, and most unmistakably, on Juliana's throat. That is not coincidence. That is not contamination. That is contact, violent, deliberate contact. Juliana's mother, Patricia Reading, sat trembling in the front row. Years of grief had etched themselves into her face, but this moment, this pursuit of justice, was the only thing keeping her upright. When Rhodes spoke, Patricia's fingers tightened around a crumpled tissue, as if holding on to faith itself. When it was his turn, defense attorney Mark Alden approached the jury with calm precision. He was older, sharp-eyed, and knew exactly how to plant seeds of doubt. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "this case is not about what evidence says. It's about what evidence seems to say. DNA is powerful, yes, but it's not perfect. It can transfer. It can contaminate. It can mislead." He let the words sink in before turning toward the jury box. "The prosecution will show you charts, photos, and scientific terms, but they cannot prove how that DNA got there. My client wasn't in that house. She was living her life somewhere else entirely. What we have here is a story built on assumptions, a puzzle forced to fit because they needed someone to blame. And just like that, the courtroom split in two. Science versus speculation, certainty versus shadow. The evidence unfolds. Over the next weeks, the trial became a spectacle. Cameras waited outside every morning. Reporters packed the benches. Podcasts dissected every testimony. Los Angeles lived and breathed the name Kelly Pack. Witnesses came and went. Detectives, forensic experts, friends, and family. Each added another thread to a web that seemed both intricate and fragile. When Detective Laura Chen, the lead investigator, took the stand, the room went silent. Her tone was steady, her memory razor-sharp. She detailed every step of the investigation, how the crime scene was sealed, how samples were preserved, how each test was double verified in separate laboratories. "We were meticulous," Chen said. "Every piece of evidence was analyzed twice. The defendant's DNA was recovered from multiple surfaces, on the victim's neck, her clothing, and even under her fingernails." Rhodes stepped forward. "Detective Chen, could those samples have been transferred accidentally?" "No," Chen said without hesitation. "The pattern of DNA tells a story of physical struggle. There was direct contact between the two women," the jury murmured. Pak's expression remained calm, but her foot tapped rapidly under the table. Her attorney noticed. When Alden rose for cross-examination, he smiled faintly. "Detective, you're familiar with the concept of secondary transfer?" "Yes." "So you'd agree it's possible, however unlikely, that DNA can move through shared objects? A towel, clothing, maybe a surface touched by both parties." Chen hesitated. "It's possible in theory." Alden turned to the jury. "Then there is reasonable doubt. If DNA can move, then certainty cannot." It was a careful dance, one meant to erode the power of the science that defined the prosecution's case. The city watches. Outside, the world watched like it was a crime show unfolding in real time. The term secondary transfer became a viral phrase. Social media debated guilt and innocence with fury. Inside the courthouse, Rhodes countered relentlessly. "This isn't theory," she told the jury. "This is fact. The defendant's DNA wasn't in one spot. It was everywhere. That's not transfer. That's presence." Then came the testimony that silenced even the reporters. Dr. Rena Morales, a forensic biologist, took the stand. She specialized in biological trace analysis, the kind of science that turns microscopic fragments into stories. "When a victim fights back," Morales said, "they often scratch or grab their attacker. The skin cells under their nails tell us who they touched in their final moments." Rhodes nodded. "And what did you find under Juliana Reading's fingernails?" "A perfect DNA match," Morales said. "To the defendant, Kelly Pak." The courtroom froze. Patricia covered her mouth, tears spilling over. Even Alden paused before rising again, searching for a foothold. "Doctor," he said, "could those cells have been transferred indirectly?" "Not these," Morales replied. "They contained skin tissue. That indicates direct contact. Juliana scratched her attacker." The truth hit like thunder. Pak blinked slowly, expression unreadable. Her lawyer whispered something, but she didn't respond. For the first time, the mask cracked. A different story. Still, Alden refused to surrender. He pivoted, away from science and into psychology. "Kelly Pak," he said to the jury, "wasn't a murderer. She was a pawn, a woman manipulated by a man far more powerful than anyone in this room. He painted Dr. Munir as a puppet master, charming, wealthy, dangerous, a man with secrets and influence, one who could make people disappear when they became inconvenient. If my client worked for him," Alden argued, "it was as a professional, an assistant, not an assassin. The money she received was legitimate. The rest is fiction written by a prosecution desperate for closure." But Rhodes had been waiting for that angle. She unveiled bank statements showing wire transfers totaling nearly $1 million, late-night calls, surveillance photos of Pak near Munir's Beverly Hills clinic weeks before the murder. Then came the witness, a trembling woman who once worked for Munir. "She came to my house," the woman said, pointing at Pak. "After I complained about my unpaid wages, she told me it'd be a shame if you went missing like that actress from Santa Monica." The words sucked the air out of the room. Rhodes didn't need to explain who the actress was. The ghosts returned. The trial dragged on for months. each day heavier than the last. The press called it the case of two ghosts, Juliana, the ghost of a life stolen, and Munir, the ghost of a man who had fled justice. Pack sat through it all, expressionless as her life unraveled. She flinched when Rhodes spoke Juliana's name, and every photo shown on the projector tightened her jaw. Alden clung to one weapon, reasonable doubt. No one saw her enter, he reminded the jury. No murder weapon was found. The alleged mastermind is gone. The system failed to bring him back, so now they're using her to fill the void. The jury listened, weary and unsure. When the closing arguments arrived, Rhodes's voice softened. "This isn't just about evidence," she said. "It's about a young woman who fought for her life. She scratched, she screamed, she fought. And in those final seconds, she told us who did this. Her body spoke the truth that words never could." She turned toward Pack. "And that truth is in your hands now," she told the jurors. Alden followed with quiet conviction. "We cannot convict someone on fear. If you believe even for a second that another explanation exists, you must find my client not guilty. That is not mercy. That is law." The room went still. The jurors rose and filed out, the heavy door closing behind them like a tomb. The weight of silence, the jury deliberated for 23 hours. Outside the courthouse, reporters huddled in raincoats beneath the gray Los Angeles sky, broadcasting every rumor that drifted out from behind the closed doors. Inside, the families waited in silence. Patricia Reading clutched a worn photo of Juliana, the corners bent from years of being held, kissed, and wept over. Kelly Pack sat at the defense table, unmoving, her face a mask carved in marble. When the jurors filed back into their seats, every breath in the room seemed to stop. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. "We have, Your Honor," the foreman's voice wavered. He unfolded a single sheet of paper and read, "On the charge of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant, Kelly Pack, guilty." The words landed like a hammer. Patricia gasped, her knees buckling as Rhodes caught her arm. Cameras clicked like gunfire outside the glass wall. Pack's expression didn't change. Only her eyes flickered once, a quiet tremor of disbelief. Judge Morales spoke firmly, his tone grave. "Kelly Pack, you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." The gavel struck. In that instant, the years of silence, investigation, and grief folded into a single sound: finality, the aftershock. The headlines the next morning were merciless. Justice for Juliana, the ice-faced killer. DNA doesn't lie. Outside the courthouse, Patricia stood before microphones, tears blurring her vision. "Nothing brings my daughter back," she whispered. "But at least she can rest now." Behind her, Rhodes placed a steady hand on her shoulder. It had taken 6 years of chasing leads, 3 different forensic teams, and a single anonymous tip to bring the case this far. For the first time, Rhodes allowed herself to exhale. Inside her cell that night, Kelly Pack sat on the narrow bunk staring at the wall. The world had decided her guilt. The evidence had sealed it, yet somewhere beneath that still exterior, something dark and private burned: anger, or maybe the quiet conviction that she had been used by someone who would never face justice. She wrote only one letter before the prison transferred her. It was addressed to Patricia R. in shaking handwriting. The prison staff logged it, but never mailed it. It sat, forgotten, in a gray cabinet for years. The vanishing, 2 years later, news broke again. During a prison transfer to a medical facility, Pack vanished. Guards discovered the transport van abandoned on a remote highway near Barstow, doors open, the driver unconscious. No trace of Pack theories bloomed like wildfire. Some said she'd been killed to keep her silent. Others swore she'd bribed her way out with Munir's money. The tabloids resurrected her ghost once more. The Phantom of Santa Monica escapes. Killer or victim? Rhodes returned to her office that night and found the old case file on her desk. The sight of Pak's cold, expressionless mugshot made her stomach twist. She had no regrets about the verdict, but she couldn't shake one question. Who helped her disappear? Patricia's year's grief had no timetable. Patricia tried to rebuild her life. She turned Juliana's childhood room into an art studio, filling the walls with portraits, faces of women who were never found, stories that had vanished into police archives. Her brushstrokes were angry at first, then softer, then weary. She painted Juliana last, eyes open, peaceful. Looking toward light, the local paper wrote about her once, the mother who paints the dead. Donations poured in, and soon Patricia used them to start the Juliana Foundation, offering support for families of missing women. At the dedication ceremony, Rhodes attended quietly at the back. When Patricia saw her, she crossed the room and embraced her. No words, just the understanding of two women bound by the same tragedy, ghosts. Resurface, 6 years past. In Istanbul, an investigative journalist named Cem Karata broke a story that would rattle the old case to its core. Dr. Farid Munir, once a celebrated cosmetic surgeon, had been arrested for running a complex identity fraud network. Among his seized documents, a forged U.S. passport photo that looked eerily like Kelly Park, but with a different name, Elena Stoyanova. Interpol confirmed the photo was recent. Rhodes received the file from Turkish authorities. Her heart stopped when she saw the image. The same sharp eyes, the same unbroken posture. Pak had survived. The news never reached the public. It was buried in bureaucracy, sealed under international protocol. But for those who knew, the detectives, the lawyers, Patricia, the revelation reopened an old wound. The second disappearance, before authorities could extradite Munir, he died, poisoned during a prison meal. The woman in the passport photo, believed to be Pak, vanished again. A surveillance camera caught her walking out of a coastal cafe the next day, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a white coat. She paused briefly at the shore, looked out at the waves, and then disappeared into the crowd. That image circulated quietly among law enforcement circles. Some claimed she'd assumed another identity in South America. Others believed she was long dead, buried under a name that wasn't hers. But Patricia, ever the mother, believed otherwise. "She's out there," she told Rhodes during one of their rare calls. "I can feel it. Like a stain you can't wash away." Rhodes didn't argue. Some truths refused to die. Echoes of justice. A decade after the trial, the courthouse where it all began was slated for demolition. Rhodes visited one last time. The empty courtroom felt smaller than she remembered. She ran her hand over the wood of the defense table, the same one where Pak had sat, silent and unyielding. "Did we get it right?" She whispered to no one. There was no answer, only the hum of distant traffic. Yet for a fleeting second, she imagined Juliana standing there, alive, smiling, unbroken. Then the image faded, leaving only dust and memory. Outside, Patricia waited. Age had softened her voice, but not her resolve. "If justice means peace," she said quietly, "I don't think we ever found it. But at least we tried." They stood together on the courthouse steps as the sun dipped low, burning the city gold. Two women, one who had fought for truth, the other who had survived its cost. The legacy, the Juliana Foundation, grew beyond anyone's expectation. Over the years, it helped locate dozens of missing women and reopened countless forgotten cases. Patricia never sought recognition, but her story became a beacon for others. In her final interview, just months before her passing, she was asked what justice meant to her. She smiled softly. "Justice isn't a verdict," she said. "It's remembering. It's refusing to let someone vanish just because it's easier that way." The camera panned across her studio one last time, canvases stacked against walls, each face a silent testimony. In the corner, one unfinished portrait remained. A woman in a white coat, walking by the sea. The reporter asked who it was. Patricia looked at it for a long moment. "That's not for me to say," she replied. "But if she's still alive, maybe one day she'll tell her own story." The final scene, somewhere far from Los Angeles. A woman entered a small cafe on a quiet morning. She ordered black coffee and sat by the window. Outside, the tide rolled in, steady and endless. She opened a small, worn envelope. Inside, a photograph of a young actress named Juliana reading. She traced the edges with her thumb. For the first time in years, a tear slid down her cheek. When the waitress approached, the woman smiled faintly. "Keep the change," she said in a soft accent, slipping a few bills onto the table. Then she stood, adjusted her coat, and disappeared into the morning crowd, just another ghost among the living. The photo of Juliana lay on the table, a faint fingerprint smudged across the corner. Epilogue years later. A storm unearthed a rusted lockbox along a coastal trail in Chile. Inside were passports, a pearl bracelet, and a single folded note written in careful English. "Forgive me. I never wanted her to die. No name, no signature. Only the faint scent of sea salt and something like regret." The lockbox was turned over to Interpol, who never publicly released its contents. But a rumor persisted in quiet corners of the internet, that somewhere, the woman once known as Kelly Pack lived under another name, painting the sea every morning, waiting for the day she could face her own reflection without fear. And in Los Angeles, a small art gallery still displayed Patricia's final collection, Women Who Refused to Disappear. The last canvas, unsigned, depicted a sunrise over the ocean, a single silhouette standing at the edge of the waves. No one knew who had finished it after Patricia's death. But those who looked closely swore they saw a faint pair of initials in the paint, KP. If you felt this story, hit that like button and tell me what you think. Was Kelly Pack a killer, or another victim lost in the system? And if you love stories that hide between truth and mystery, subscribe now and turn on the bell so you never miss what the world tries to forget.